I wanted to begin today with something that terrified me in The Body Artist. The opening scene is mic'd almost like a Kubrick set. You hear the sounds of glasses and toast going down, clicks and pops, and it's not until the middle of the novel that we realize why. Hiding in the walls and the crawl space of this house is a gnome-like person who has learned to mimic the sounds of intimacy, and will provide for the woman who lives in the house the noises of the man she loved who lived there. And I began to think that this is, a mimetic machine, more human than a tape recorder, but less than human. And I began to think how interesting that he seemed so childlike, and seemed almost as if representation and our need for it was a human need, but one that requires us to become machine-like in order to be precise and accurate. It seemed as if, like, the very basis of what narration does, imitation and representation, was being thrown into a really frightening perspective.
This is true. And I think what's frightening is that this character who is given the name Mr. Tuttle, we don't know his name, he doesn't know his name, we don't know if he even has a name. This character lives in time as it truly exists. Einstein said time is a fiction, and by that I think what he meant is that our perception of time is not a genuine description of the way in which the structure of time exists in the universe around us. And this man, Mr. Tuttle, it seems to me, lives in time in an unprotected way. He's not able to protect himself as we do through our misperception of the nature of time. It's the only way we can live. He can barely live. He can't speak clearly. He moves in a jerky sort of manner. He's totally lost in the world, which could only mean that he is in the real world, not in the world we have built with our self-protective mechanisms. We don't know what the universe is truly like. This is my reading of what certain scientists, certain cosmologists seem to be saying. And so my idea was simply to try to imagine a character in this terrible dilemma. One of the things he seems to be able to do is to move forward and backward in time, although he certainly doesn't do this willingly. And I'm not quite sure if he does it physically or not. He's been living in this house unknown to the people who live there for some days or weeks, actually, which is an old idea of mine. Actually an idea for a stage play some years ago, that an elderly couple find a man who's been living in their house for 7 years, perhaps. And over time, this idea evolved or de-evolved into the person of Mr. Tuttle, as you say, a sort of gnome-like man, a slightly overgrown elf, living unknown to the people who occupy the house, and able to imitate their voices involuntarily, but unable to say very much that makes the slightest sense at all. He's totally lost in language. I have not spoken about The Body Artist until this moment, and part of the reason is that I don't know how to speak about it. I'm almost in Mr. Tuttle's position in talking about such subjects as time and the future, and so I've sort of stayed away from explication until now, and on the verge of stuttering as we go on.
Well, it's very interesting to me because I think that there are certain books that almost stand, as opposed to the ones that are consciously inarticulate. There are books that stand for the inarticulate in a writer's work. For me, one of them is Joy Williams's book, The Changeling, which also has an in-between human figure making an appearance, seeming to begin a new race or reinitiate an old one. But there seems to be something that makes novels. I think of Kafka's Mole as well. These characters live in between spaces, crawl spaces. They speak a language, but they can't explain how they speak it. They know it's not their own. And it seems that they frequently are inchoate communicators of what storytelling is in some sense. Something came from somewhere that can't be accounted for, and in the account, this becomes the story. I'm interested in it because there is a kind of pre-human, post-human tone that people have talked about in different ways throughout the work, but the figure of Mr. Tottle both overconnects to the woman he now finds himself living. He supplants her director friend, and he underconnects in that he can't tell her very much about himself or his condition. He seems to be very much a figure of the artist.
I thought of him originally as a young man of a certain of certain physical dimensions, impressively so, and almost immediately he rejected this and became a small, nearly helpless human being. And I'm not sure I know how to say much more about him. He disappears. He appears mysteriously, disappears somewhat mysteriously, but he is real. I think readers of this book have imagined that he might be a fantasy generated by the main character, who is the body artist of the title, although Mr. Tuttle also fits that category.